Welcome, everyone, to a new episode of the Game Changers podcast, where we shine the spotlight on great people in the industry, especially those who are currently going through a career transition of sorts. And today I have an amazing guest that I really wanted to have on this show. So, George, why don't we kick things off right away? Introduce yourself to our listeners, and then we take it from there.
Hey Lars, thank you for having me. It's a great opportunity, so thank you. My name's George Beard. I am a games designer and lecturer, and recently I've been the lead game designer on the unannounced Time Splitters game by the former Free Radical, now former again. Before that, I've spent a decade in education, teaching, creating courses at Norwich University of the Arts and through Next Gen Skills Academy. And we've done very well, won a lot of awards, so that's also been fantastic. Before that, I made Facebook and mobile games. And that's kind of my general background. But I started out as a 3D artist, and that's what I worked in the industry previously as. And then through university, I've become a games designer.
So moving from art into creating, I don't want to say more than that, but creating like the bigger picture thing, like developing your own ideas. It seems it's a path that I've seen from quite a few people in the industry, actually.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting. I mean, I don't know if some people get frustrated with their craft, or they feel they want to have more kind of creative ownership than being given specifications. But it definitely does happen more often than you'd think.
How was the transition for you from mobile games, Facebook games, you mentioned social games at the time, over to like the PC console game development? Was it hard to do?
Well, I mean, through the fact that the course we were developing at university was so good, and that we've got the respect of that, we brought in a lot of external people from the biggest companies, Ubisoft, everyone, to consult and give us the lowdown on what they expect and how they operate. So, teaching for 10 years within a space where we're trying to keep it current meant that it was very easy for me then to go into a studio, because it was a mirror of all the information I'd been given and all the delivery I'd given to students. So actually that was fairly painless.
Are you still in touch with some of the students that you were teaching at the time?
Well, this was a nice thing about working at Free Radical, is that there was quite a lot of students who were already gone there that I taught recently, and some I taught in the past. I actually managed to get an amazing picture at one of the Christmas parties with one of the first students I ever taught back at Abate about 13 years ago, and then one of my most recent graduates who I encouraged to work with me here. So kind of students 13 years apart was quite nice.
Cool. So let's get into yourself a little bit. And there's one question I like asking as kind of the first one to get a bit of a sense of who you are. So since we all love video games, I'm always thinking about video game characters and the ones that we identify with. So if you had the opportunity to have a conversation with a video game character of your choice, from the past or present, who would that character be, and what would you ask the character?
Well, I've thought about this a little bit. I mean, the first one I want to go to as a lifelong Half-Life fan, and considering Gordon Freeman never spoke, I kind of would like to speak to Gordon Freeman. But then in that vein, I wouldn't know what to ask him. I mean, he's a very smart physicist in his world, and any conversation should be interesting. But other than that, maybe within the same world would be G-Man, but his cadence would probably make an hour-long conversation quite painful. So I'm not sure about that either, because I wouldn't know what to ask them. Whereas with something like one of my other favorite series would be Max Payne.
I love Max Payne. Played all the games. Really
well,
cool.
It's very sad that the voice actor died recently, didn't he?
Yeah. I read that.
But having a drink in a Brooklyn bar with Max Payne as a real world character would be pretty fun, I think.
Although he's also not a man of many words, as far as I recall.
That's true, but he is a policeman, so I'm sure he would enjoy a drink with his squad mates and things. So
absolutely. Now you brought back the memories of like playing Max Payne. So I mean, sometimes it's better to hold these games in good memory and then not play them again like so many years later, just because of the visuals. But it was an outstanding experience. I would definitely look forward to having another Max Payne coming soon. So Remedy, if you hear me,
Wow,
here I am. So, moving a bit from like the character to your journey in the industry so far, can you recall a Eureka moment that you might have had at any point that kind of changed your perspective on making games, or that helped define who you are and how you approach things in the games industry today? Was there anything like that, like one of those crucible moments?
So, well, actually, one of the biggest Eureka moments I had was while I was still a student. So we had a fairly contentious speaker come in, a designer called Chris Crawford, who's quite long in the tooth now, but it was a 6 hour lecture he gave. But
Six
it
hour lecture
6 hour
in one
lecture,
go and no
yeah,
breaks.
in one go. He just kept going.
Holy moly!
He didn't stop. So he's a very interesting character, and again, he's quite Marmite in the industry on his opinions. And he was talking to us about kind of procedural narrative and things, and that was 15 plus years ago. But the takeaway that I had that was really interesting was his commentary on employment and whether a company sees value in you and how they invest in you. So his commentary was basically, you shouldn't work anywhere that doesn't put any time into keeping you current or trained in any fashion. People that are basically putting you on a shelf to do the work and letting you gather
Right.
dust in your craft. And that's been especially interesting at this point in my life while I'm looking for new jobs, because I get a very divisive reaction to my CV, to the fact I've spent so much time teaching, from companies. You've got places like Ubisoft who put a huge amount of value into people who understand how to do training or education. And then I've met other companies, which I won't name, that have told me I should get rid of 10 years of teaching experience off of my CV. So it's
Really, somebody said that to you?
CEO of a company recently said you should get rid of all your teaching. I don't know how I'd explain a 10-year gap in my CV, but that's just bizarre. And it also gives me the fear that they don't put that kind of investment in their team once they're employed.
Right, and I mean it's clearly not a good fit then for you if you see that. I mean, 'cause I come from teaching myself a little bit, and I always like mentoring young talent coming to the industry, which is also to some extent part of the reason why I wanted to do this podcast and invite people of all kind of different backgrounds, because I think you need to pay forward in a way, help people to support them, give them a platform, and teaching is like the prime example of that. You actually help bring the next generation to this industry. So I can't value it high enough. So,
And it's an expected part of any management or senior role in the games industry. It's the parallels
absolutely.
are there. So I don't quite understand that logic, but there we go.
Well, I mean, surprising to hear that, but I think how to make your decision in that regard. So
Absolutely.
that's good at least. So I think one other element I wanted to look at is, if you think about making games, and if you could go back in time and think of games that you adored, or that you somehow spend a lot of time with. Is there any game you can remember that you would have loved to work on, and for what reason?
Well, going back to fond memories of games, I mean, I love playing RTSs as well. It's another
Mhm.
kind of area that I like to spend a lot of time in. There's an old game called Warzone 2100 that I used to really enjoy playing, and I would love to have been part of that team making it. Um, I just had a really interesting post-apocalyptic take that I've not seen anywhere else. That was quite interesting. Again, going back to Max Payne, maybe if I was there for Max Payne 3, I might have encouraged them to do more of the New York rather than the kind of South American scene setting that they tried to do. And just to be part of another Max Payne would be phenomenal. Um,
So, guys, if you need a lead designer on the next Max Payne, there's your guy right here.
we know some people at Remedy. I should reach out. Yeah. But those are the kind of things off the top of my head. It's probably not that engaging for your audience if they're not old enough to know those games. But yeah, that's what I would like to have been a part of.
Well, I think we have an audience that is across all the age groups, actually leaning a bit more toward like it sounds strange if I say that, older listeners, so 40 plus. So I think you're right in that target audience. Oh my god, I called myself old right now. It's like, anyway, so it's I think a lot of people will know Max Payne and played it. So from games and characters now over to challenges in the industry that we have right now? I mean, obviously, the entire industry is in a bit of a difficult phase right now. I think we could say that.
Absolutely.
So, what are challenges that you see in either the industry or in making games today that you are particularly curious or passionate about? Is there anything that you would love to solve or create, and how would you go about it?
Well, I am curious with the current state of the industry, not just my situation, which has its own kind of source, but I mean, in general, talking to recruiters at the minute, supposedly there's been about 8,000 layoffs globally,
Yeah.
and a lot of them in the last 3 months, which is just bonkers. Um, I mean, my curiosity is like, is this an outcome of kind of over hiring during COVID and the swell they got from that, and how could we avoid that in the future? I mean, it goes back again to how are companies deciding to retain and nurture staff and studios so that we don't have this continued reality of full studio closures that has been going on
Mhm.
for decades, right? Now, again, it harks back to where is that coming from? Is it because we have three levels of corporate structure that mean big swings in stock prices, or problems for stakeholders suddenly become an issue for the person trying to pay their mortgage, or how should we be going about that? I don't necessarily have a solution. It's a problem for any company in any industry, but it definitely um, there's definitely a lot of kind of corporate buyouts and corporate shutdowns and things that I'm very aware of in games that I would like to
Mhm.
try and avoid. And I wouldn't know how to go about it, but there definitely doesn't feel like the respect for employees that there could be. That a lot of companies are trying to do, but then they're not necessarily the same scale as others.
Yeah, and I think a lot have been affected. So I mean, we see it like with some more than others, but still in the wider industry. I mean, it seems to be very challenging for many, not only a few,
Yeah.
which makes it so hard to deal with at the moment. But if we look away from the corporate side, from the industry side for a moment into making games, I mean, you're a game
Hmm.
designer, so I was wondering, do you have any particular challenges in making games and designing games that you're curious about that you would love to tackle with the next thing that comes up for you?
Well, I mean, the tools that we have available to us are changing, and then we're seeing a potentially sunsetting of things like Unity, whereas Unreal and Epic are providing new platforms to make things like games design within their products more and more simple, or more appropriate for the bulk of studios. But the age-old thing for a lot of these engines is they're obviously built on the back of ultimately Doom, but all the kind of all the tech coming afterwards, they still don't necessarily bring a broad what's the word? They don't make it as easy to go non-first person shooter as they could for new people. I'm talking, obviously seasoned professionals can twist an engine to do whatever they like.
Right.
That's I understand that fully. Um, but all the kind of middleware and everything else does seem quite muddled, and then you do need very seasoned people to bend these engines to do what you need to do, and I think that's difficult potentially for students in a lot of ways. And Unity was getting there, but again, with the decisions they've made recently, I think that's really tricky. And I know there's a lot of other options out there with Godot and everything else, but if things like Unreal are going to be the leading engine as is seen at the minute, then I think that it would be good if they were a bit broader in what they do. That's just an opinion I have.
All right. No, it definitely is a topic that comes up in many conversations I have also with younger developers that trying to get into the industry that built their own games. I mean, you see more and more now trying to pick up Unreal Engine 5 and then play around with it and see what they can do. But it's definitely a challenge. I think there's quite a bit of a learning curve, obviously. And you said like seasoned professionals are what you usually need in order to really build the pipelines around that.
Absolutely.
So I'm personally wondering and very curious about what comes in the next couple of years. Are people going to be able to build games on their own, which we still sometimes see? I have the feeling, especially in the indie space, there's people that still do that, but oftentimes it's their own engines, their own or not even engines. Maybe it's just really hard coded, if you
Yeah.
will. So it's going to be a very interesting space going going forward. I think you still see those incredible successes by individuals and small teams, but of course, it's very hard to rely on it going forward. But
Yeah.
the dream should never stop.
No,
So.
absolutely not. That's what I was delivering at university was indie development. But you can't teach 10 engines at once. You've got to pick something that's going to be the
Absolutely.
most applicable to the most people. And they made phenomenal things. But my thought is, how much easier could it have been?
Yeah,
So
true.
we'll see.
At least right now, with the dominance of Unreal in the industry, you know which engine to teach. I guess if you have to pick.
Absolutely, yeah. Gives them the
So,
best job opportunities.
so speaking of dreams and aspirations, of course, I'm curious. What's next for you, and I assume you're in different conversations. You're looking for something, but what is kind of the essence of what you look for next? Do you have any dreams in terms of games you want to make, in contributions you want to have on a team? I would love to talk a bit about that.
Sure. I mean, from my kind of era of people, most people look at Valve as the Valhalla of games developers. For better for worse, it's where developers potentially go to die, but also have their best life in terms of work-life balance.
You certainly have the beard, not only in your name, but also for those who listen to this as the audio-only version of the podcast, you don't see it, but George has a very impressive beard, so you would definitely be ready for Valhalla, I guess.
Thank you. Yeah, so I mean, Valve would be very cool, and anything Half-Life related holds a nice place in my heart. I mean, I'm generally disenfranchised with franchises. There hasn't been a lot of new things that are third, fourth, fifth versions of stuff that I used to love that have encouraged me to want to go and work on the next one. And again, with that creative freedom, doing something with a smaller indie company would be definitely probably a preference, because that's a space I feel more comfortable in a lot of ways. However, a lot of those approaches work very well in feature teams and studios that are developing multiple projects at once. And we had such a great team at Free Radical. So I guess I would be interested in working on something that is unique. I don't have huge preferences on projects. Obviously, I have worked on shooters before. I have an interest in every kind of game you can imagine. I have a big fondness for RPGs. So, an RPG of sorts would definitely be a nice challenge, because it has so much content that you get to touch, that you get to say that I worked on that. Compared to smaller games that only have 10 items or whatever, whereas all the characters, all the world, all the narrative, being able to feel that you've helped filter that and touch all of that would be phenomenal.
Do you have any favorite games at the moment that are in recent history that you played that kind of influence what you would be interested in working on?
Well, I'm still yet to play Baldur's Gate 3.
Oh, you should.
However, my cousin worked on the original Baldur's Gate games as an environment artist at BioWare. So that was probably what got me into games. One of my first Christmas presents was Baldur's Gate 1, when he'd finished that. So again, that's got me into tabletops and everything else. So continued work on Baldur's Gate 3, as it's such a massive thing. They're probably going to expand rather than do it straight into a 4, would be very cool. I'd be very keen for that. But I know there's at this point, Wizards of the Coast, there's a ton of other companies working with that product. So I'd be happy to work on a lot of different things, Neverwinter Nights and stuff like that.
It's funny that you mentioned Baldur's Gate being your first Christmas present. I remember, that time when I got a game for Christmas. My grandma actually bought it. It was Mortal Kombat 3. The problem was, it was actually rated mature, and I was
Absolutely.
13 or 12
Yeah.
or something. Somehow I gotta admit now, I tricked her into getting the game, and she didn't really care much for age ratings, and so. I never worked on a beat 'em up afterwards, but still, Mortal
Didn't do
Kombat
your own
holds
rotoscoping at home.
a good place in my heart. So,
Um,
um, I was wondering one question that I originally hadn't planned to ask, but AI is something that everybody's talking about right now, and
Mm,
obviously it has a big impact on everything in game development right now, whether it's
absolutely.
game design or art or programming, whatever it is. Do you have any view on this and how this is going to change the landscape for game developers going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a hugely contested topic in the studio in Free Radical. Obviously from an art side, there is a huge kind of fear there because it's obviously driven by people that have already put in their hours to make
Right.
artwork that good, and then it can be instantly kind of rejigged and fabricated from artists with or without permission. And I can understand the issues there. That is hugely contentious. Um, on the flip side, if you're using it just to try and generate just really, rather than kind of going through Google Image and making a folder full of 100 reference images and then trying to get someone to put it together, even though it's meant to be a really quick initial thing, getting AI to just get you kind of in the ballpark for someone who's not art kind of related, and then getting
Uh,
artists after the fact to put it where it needs to be or to feed off of that and put it in your world, I think is pretty valuable. It really depends how your company feels about that. For developers, it's hugely helpful, especially for those either trying to learn. It's a massively useful learning tool for programming. If you're having trouble trying to figure out how to go about certain problems, it might be able to show you a pattern in a programming pattern that you might not have thought of using for systems that you're trying to make. And for indie developers as well, if you're trying to do things solo and maybe you're more art centric and you need to somehow muddle together the basic code, you can probably get AI to get you 90% of the way there. So that can really empower people to make solo projects. So I can see it being really beneficial, but it is going to be contentious for a long time.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, yeah, I gotta admit, AI helped me a lot in putting this podcast together, like in doing all the prep work and helping me here and there, like little snippets of text and content and so on. So I probably wouldn't have been able to pull this off in such a short amount of time to get this started without the help of what's out there right now in terms of AI tools. So
It's an
personally, I feel very positive about it, but I fully agree with you. It is going to be very interesting to see what it does to the games industry in general. And I think there will be applications that we can't even see now that will evolve over the next couple of months and the next few years. So I do believe it will have a major impact on everything. And I'm definitely curious to see, how it changes the different disciplines in making a game.
Well, I mean, as you've just said there, for those who know programming and know the term debug duck, which is basically if you have a problem with a system, you explain your system to a rubber duck that's on your desk, and usually through that process of explaining how the
Mhm.
system should work, you resolve the problem. Um, as you've just said, using AI to just be a soundboard and to feedback with its own knowledge and context is hugely helpful for just developing ideas and developing the things that you want to do. Which, if you're trying to work alone and maybe you've got a partner that doesn't know anything about your industry, it's just this kind of just a support blanket. It's great.
Absolutely. I don't have a debug duck, by the way. But I have a debug little bobblehead jackalope here on my desk that I sometimes talk to, if I need
Some
advice.
bobbleheads behind me.
So, yeah, really cool. All right, George, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. It was a lot of fun, and I think we got to cover a lot of what you stand for and what you're looking for going forward. It was a pleasure having you here. Thank you for being my guest. Thank you to all the listeners of this episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And George, I wish you all the best for the upcoming months, and I hope that I get to see the amazing things that you will be building.
Thank you very much, Lars. It's been great, and I hope you have a lovely festive season.
Absolutely. Same to you, George. Thank you.